Hey everyone. So today I want to talk about how I do agentic coding, and I would like to take you through the process of how I go step by step in sequence, right from the very beginning to a shipped product. And especially in this day and age where things are fast evolving, every day seems like a year. So I want to show you how it looks like right now. This is June 2026, and who knows, maybe like next month it could be completely different. I might just like break apart some of the process, but this is what it looks like right now. I've been trying to get to a place where I have some form of a pipeline where ideas just like come in and flow through this process. And whenever I sit in front of my system, I really know what to do and what to change or what to ship, even. So, what I do is I use this thing called Trello, which you might have heard of. It's a very simple interface, mainly used for Kanbans. So what I usually do is to have like several boards for various purposes. I use a board for building side projects, which is this thing called as indie building. That's a specific board on Trello. And I have all my ideas. Whenever I get them, I just capture them and place them in this board. What I also do is to have different boards for other themes as well. So I have this for shopping, for things which are not just software or shipping ideas. It could be just like generic creative stuff. So I have dedicated board even for that, where I also place them and try to proceed with them as much as possible. And I found this to be a better way to do certain work which is more creative, especially when there is a creative work. You find it very hard to place them in a calendar. It's hard to even like allocate time. For instance, you just want to get like drift into this pursuit of doing something interesting and meaningful, and I personally found that to be quite restrictive. So what I do here is to just place them on the Trello board, because here it doesn't really give a notion of how much time you're allocating, but just that you want to advance on those ideas. So coming back to this topic of how I proceed with the side project ideas, as I've shown you, there is this board for side projects, and it's also easy for me to like just like switch across multiple boards. Again, there are like keyboard shortcuts which are quite helpful to do that, and there is some progress. It's not just like a graveyard of dead projects. There is something which I've been doing and I'm quite happy about. So it's a good practice to have like one idea which you are like consciously working on, especially if you have like multiple ones. It really becomes hard to juggle between them, and I've personally found that it's important to also hold a particular problem in your head entirely, and not to just have a mixed bag of multiple projects and try to like advance them. I think many people can do this, but personally I found it to be like quite unsuccessful to do that, especially since there's a lot of context switching which happens, and we're all human after all, so it just gets lost in that. You also might lose interest. So I found that when you have like momentum towards a particular idea, it's helpful to just like advance on that particular one. And once I have an inkling of idea of what to do, I then start having a conversation with these ChatGPT or any of these language models, sometimes on the go, and I'm just getting some kind of a question which I want to really ask or poke. So I just like shoot them up, fire them up, and see what the language models are telling me, if it's a good one or not, as a form of a mentor dialogue, which happens where things evolve with the conversation advancing over time. So as you can see here, this idea of building a video editor app which functions similar to how Cursor does for ID. I was imagining if there could be a similar interface which could be serving the purpose of video editing. I wanted to see if this is possible by means of just like a ChatGPT subscription, where anyone could just like sign in with their existing subscription and could directly just start talking to the sidebar and then make a series of edits on their videos without having to like just manually like cut, stitch, or like do any of these effects to the video. I start teasing it and see what the agents are telling me, and it gives me some information of like what stack to use, how you could really like execute things. And I had also given some instructions to the agents that as soon as it like puts this in the form of a tabular structure, I immediately understand what it's telling, what the stack is, and various such micro things. It's easier for me to like take notice, so that's also helpful. One thing which I do, see if I could steelman or strawman an argument. So for example, if I say that I need an X for Y, I try to ask what is the worst thing that could happen, or like if there are certain things that could go wrong. So I try to like strawman the argument, get like a complete picture, because you might certainly also get into a form of a psychophantic mode, because the models tend to always like appreciate what you're saying. So it's helpful to like just like decouple the genuine appreciation from the fact that there are certain things which could be even like flaws to the argument. It's just like a debating structure, but it's helpful to put them in a product idea, because you need to see like both the perspectives, and then you try to like stitch it together. I also might get into certain rabbit holes. So again, when you're building something, it might be that you're building something from scratch, but the reality is not the case, because there's so much of ready-made or open source repositories available on GitHub, which might have probably like solved the same thing in a more smarter way. So it's really important for us to even see if there is something already available, and helpful to do some research on that. When it comes to like light research, I just like ask if there are certain libraries which we could adapt or we could take inspiration from. And in the deep research mode, which ChatGPT, I think, if you might have used, you have um, you have this mode called as deep research, which is really useful to go extra deep and like literally scrape the internet and try to see if there is any trace of some library which can be useful for your purposes, right? Especially with building software, it's good to do this, because like a superficial search on GitHub or Google can give you some results, but might not be like completely thorough enough for you to actually like make some conclusions. So this is what I usually do if in case I want to go the research route, especially in terms of what libraries which I need to use for my software architecture. Those kind of questions are really handy to do this way. So as you can see here, I had done some form of a deep research, and it has just like gone back and came back with like a very thorough response. It took 30 minutes, but it's worth the time. As you can see, there are like 28 citations, 120 searches, but the document which it gives is quite thorough and useful for taking it to the next steps. I think I kind of explained a couple of concepts in this early exploration. One, how I have selected an idea from my existing pipeline of various random ideas, excited to build. And the second thing which I've shown you is also how I do my first chat with agents, trying to like really shape it and see if there is something which I could like extend this further or not. And once I really see the promise in extending this conversation into something more concrete in the form of an app, I also do some research. It's similar to how you do market research or like literature study when it comes to like actually publishing academic papers, right? It's helpful to know what others have done, so you could either build on top of them or build completely something from scratch. But it doesn't make sense for you to like build things from scratch for every random thing, because you're just like wasting tokens in that sense. So we need to be like a bit conscious of that, and that's something I've learned the hard way, because I felt that GitHub has answers to almost all questions we're asking for. Whenever I'm trying to also converse with the agents, I also do ask them if they could explain visually. And especially on a chat interface, it's easier for them to communicate by means of an ASCII. So, for example, this is a response which I asked it to like provide, because the answer which it gave me was in the form of a text, and it was really hard for me to imagine. So I told it like, hey, whatever you're mentioning, provide in the form of an ASCII format, so then I could at least like visualize the components and how each of these tie into each other. So this was really nice that way. And once I almost like come to the last mile, where I've found confidence in expanding this to the next step, I do some form of handoff, where I want to like take this conversation from a chat GPT conversation to something more concrete, where I take this in a IDE or a terminal. So that's the next step. And the best way which I do here is to use transfer all this into a form of a vision document. And that's something I've been like recently doing. So this is when I take it to the next step, which is to bring this into the terminal, where I open Opencode, which is a harness used specifically for using various language models. Apart from that, you can also use open source models, and it's having a great design experience. And I'm a big fan of how easy it is to have a chat, reference chats, or even export chats for that matter. So I really didn't touch upon like the benefits of using Ghosty, which is this application where I run all my agents on the terminal. Of course, you could use the native Mac terminal as well, but it doesn't really give you that speed and performance as what Ghosty gives you. So I would really recommend you to like install Ghosty and start using it for any of your terminal needs. And once you're on terminal, you could and so once you're on Ghosty, you could also like do multiple things. As you can see here, each tab is a project. So if I'm running like multiple projects, I run them on different tabs. So it gives like a similar experience of how what you get in Chrome. For example, as you're like over here, as you can see, there are like certain keyboard shortcuts to help you like, let's say, split tabs. So Command T, as you have something similar to Google Chrome where you are opening a new tab. So that's great. You could also like divide a pane. So as you can see here, I have like two different panes, and let's say I can open this on a different project. Let's say I'm opening on Excalibur, and I can open Opencode here. I can open the same application over in a different folder, and this is how you could kind of like multitask. But there could even be cases where you have like multiple agents running on the same project, so this is really handy to have that demarcation. I open code, and then I first select probably the model as a default. I usually go with the GPT series, so in this case it will be a GPT 5.5. And once I've selected the model, I then select the file. So if I have a doubt as to which file it is, I can always open a shell command by doing an exclamation mark and then typing any of the commands. So it says yes, so there is an product outline file. So what I'm going to do is to first select the skill. In this case, it would be the product shaping skill, which I've been using ever since Ryan Singer had recommended this workflow. And over here, I then reference the file which I wanted to just show you what the file looks like. Yeah, so this is the rough outline, and this is the output from the conversation which I've had, right? So it has like enough of all the perspectives in place, and it makes sure that I don't lose any of those critical bits. And when I'm referencing this and I'm then saying like shape this document, so the other thing which I also do is to ensure that all my projects are under a same folder. It gets really helpful to have all your software examples, best code practices in one place, because it's now easier for you to like reference them. What I do right now is if I see a particular pattern which has been established in some other project, it's easier for me to like reference the file and folder. So then it could kind of use that as an example to then create code for my upcoming project. So it's all in a way for compounding the work which you do and not to like repeat this all over again for your next project. As you can see here, this is like the place where I place all my folders. And if I find some example from, let's say, a Rails application which I built, I could use that for other Rails application as well. Going back to the actual project, as you can see here, I have seen here the code output which has been generated. It has listed some documents, and what I'm going to do now is to like read them on my code editor. So I'll just open that. I think it's in this one. This is the folder. So I'm opening that folder on my code editor, and it has all the documents. So I'm just going to like read through them and review if there's something which needs to be like clarified. So let's go through this one by one. This is the actual main document which has generated. And one other advantage of using Z is that it's easier to like preview on Markdown as well, because like you might have like conversations with your agents and you might have like Markdown outputs, and it's not easy for you to like read them on the terminal. There are ways to do this, but I'm not a big fan of that. I would rather open the Markdown on my code editor and read them carefully. So this is what I'm doing now. So it's giving me, say, certain requirements. What is at present? There is nothing built so far. So it's saying like no product flow yet. So this product especially is to see if I could make it easier for converting a video into a video karaoke, so that's easier for anyone to like sing along to the audio. And to do this, it has given me like certain directions. So one is where this could just be like a web application with a portable GPU worker, because it needs GPU to like do that processing of extracting the right audio and then like stitching lyrics on top of it. So that's like one direction which I could potentially go. The other direction is like, yeah, a single Rails server and using that for like processing everything. And then the third option it has given me is like completely like local first, where I build everything on the local and then see if I want to like build a web application on top of it. So not just that, it kind of like looks at the requirements, like it's giving like particular numbers, right? R0, R1 and so on. So it's easy for you to like even reference, right? Like say R1 is having a issue. I mean, we need to like improvise this R1 to something else, right? So it's easier for like also like communicating to the agents. And with these requirements you can also like check what in what way each of these shapes are matching, because not everything is the most definitive way to do things. So you could then use this to take your next move, and it even like describes the next move here, which is like run the spikes, right? And spikes are a very important part of this process, because these are like venturing into unknowns and checking like technical feasibility with respect to the entire application. So if you see like certain places which are still unknowns, and it also like describes them. So here it says like update A7 and A8 with concrete mechanisms. If shape A passes, detail A, right? So it's more confident to go with the shape A approach. Okay, I think I might have missed this message which is just written. So it's saying that like shape A, which is a web control plane with portable GPU, is the leading shape, but it's also not ready to slice between, because A7 and A8 are unknowns, right? So let's just go back to the A7 and A8 here. So it says like, yes, I had referenced like vast.ai GPU worker. So it should kind of like spike if this integration is working properly or not. And the A8 is where I need to align the lyrics with the video audio playback. So it needs to be in sync, and there is a question whether this lyrics would exactly be in sync or not. Unless we try it out, we can't say. So these are the unknowns in the shape A. Although it recommends that it's not necessary for you to like go with that shape, you have your own taste and intuition. So what I am currently thinking of is to just do this all on local. If you could like test this on your local environment, and if it works to some extent, you could kind of like take this to the cloud. And of course, when you take it to the cloud, there might be like different configurations there, but at least you try it as a proof of concept, and it's easier to do like faster iterations when you do it locally as well. So I'm more inclined towards like shape C here. So what I would then say is like, let me just do my voice transcription. Explore shape C, because I'm more comfortable with doing this locally and doing this in faster iterations and then moving forward to that. So with shape C, tell me if there are any spikes which needs to be performed. So I'm using this tool called as the handy.computer, and it's faster because it uses this model called Parakeet, which is having like faster TTS services. And yeah, I've just like given this across, and let's see what it gives me information. So I've steered it back to shape C because I've changed my mind, although I thought it was shape A first. And it's now looking at it and seeing if there is some spikes which needs to be tested. Okay, it's updating the document again, and I'm going to like go back to this. Let me just like reload it and see if something has changed. I'm going to preview this again and see what it has for shape C. So yes, so now you see that as the focus has shifted towards shape C, it has given me like certain flags which needs to be like spiked first, and you could describe or index them, right? Like it's C1, C2, C4 and so on. And let's see what the final answer is. Okay, so now it's describing me all the spikes which is needed for shape C. So it's saying that, yeah, I need to first define the local command line operations to kind of like test this local. As now I have these outlined, I'll be like proceeding to like do the spikes one by one. So let's say I say do spike 1. See, do the spike 1. So in this way, you like slowly proceed towards advancing in your application. When you do the spikes, you might have a conclusion which is positive or negative. No matter what, you might use that input to steer the direction in a different way, probably, if things go wrong. So this is again a very iterative process. You would not really have the foresight of having an exact way to do things. So it's helpful to have this and like learn as you go, or like learn on the fly. And that's how I usually like build and shape things. And once you get to a point where it is completely shaped, you have the spikes cleared, and you know like this is the direction you want to head to. With that shape, you would start to like break them into like slices, as you call it in the shape up methodology. So each slice is something called as a demoable unit. So it should be possible for you to like really feel it, so then you could give like much more feedback as a user. And the idea here is not to kind of like, if you're building a bicycle, you wouldn't just build like the wheel separately and the seat separately and then like bring them all together in an assembly line. This is slightly different from the way like even iterative development happens. Here you're building in slices, and the most closest analogy for this is if you're kind of like going from A to B. Let's say you're on top of a cliff and you want to like go towards the other side. There is an opposite cliff in front of you. You could probably build a bridge. Maybe that's the best way to do this for on a larger scale, but you wouldn't really start with building a bridge directly, right? You wouldn't just like build a block, because you would just like fall down. And the best way then to do is to kind of just like build a steel thread and make it possible for you to like just go towards, say, the cliff B. And once you establish a steel thread, you could then see what next to do, right? So this is kind of like the idea of like building in slices or like demoable units, and each demoable unit should kind of like take you to some point which helps you to give you feedback to the agents, right? And that's currently how I do my like way of building apps. So again, this is just like a gist of how I go about with building applications and just showing you an overall process towards it. As I showed you earlier, it starts with just like, say, putting it across on a Trello board so that you can capture it and not lose it at that moment. And once you do that, you could then start having a conversation with agents to just see if you can riff raff on that idea and find flaws, make it much more comprehensive. And once you're in a good shape of this direction, you have a vision of what you want to build. Use that vision as a reference and open on Ghostty, where you could just have a chat with it by referencing that product vision document. And when you do that, when you're using the shaping skill, you would kind of have these conversations where you would like want to see in which approach you want to take. There are many ways to build a solution towards a problem, right? So the shaping skill is also handy to take you to like, okay, show you three different shapes which can be like taken forward, and it's up to you to see if like the approaches make sense or not. Probably you might have to do certain spikes to just like make it more clear, but that's the iterative process you would be following to kind of take you to the final goal.